Hi everyone, welcome back to Visually Hidden Selects. I'm Peter O'Brien, and today I'd like to talk to you about Into the Wild from 2007. This film is based on the true life story of Christopher Johnson McCandless, which was also the subject for the book of the same name, written by Jon Krakauer. The film, however, was adapted by Sean Penn, who also directed it. It's a really excellent adaptation. In the book, the author, Jon Krakauer, he draws a number of parallels between himself and Chris McCandless. And Sean Penn, he just filters all of that out and focuses on the story of Chris. And in doing so, he really just adds another element to the story where it's not so much a documentary or docudrama as much as it is almost a romantic fantasy, an interpretation of this young man's life and the way that he looked at life. So in that regard, Sean Penn, he really kind of distilled the essence of what he took from the story and what he took from the character and made it into something that is truly heartfelt. The story takes place in the early 1990s, and it follows the main character, Chris McCandless, after he graduates from Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. And he kind of forsakes his parents and their goals for him at that point, and he donates his entire life savings to charity, gets in his car, and heads west. He destroys all of his forms of identification as well as burns the rest of his remaining cash and sets off on foot, assuming the name Alexander Supertramp. And ultimately, he works towards his main goal of having an Alaskan adventure in the wild. There are a number of things that make this film special. First and foremost is the performance by Emile Hirsch. He plays Chris McCandless, Alexander Supertramp, and he carries the film in a way that not many young people can carry a film of this magnitude and this story, the gravitas of this story being based on a real-life person, and all of the supporting cast as well. Chris McCandless, throughout his journey, met a number of different people in different areas of the country, and the film replicates that part of the story, and so there are these different characters who come in and out of Chris's journey. They're not even cameos so much as they are supporting roles because, again, they do come in and out of the story at different points and he maintains connections with them. I think one of the more surprising aspects of this film are the actors who portray these supporting characters, specifically Vince Vaughn and Zack Galifianakis. They are both known for their comedy, but here they are in a very, very serious, dramatic role, and while there is comedy in their scenes, they aren't playing it up for laughs the way they normally would in a regular comedy role. They're just coming across as regular guys, characters that Chris McCandless encountered along his journey. A lot of faces pop up throughout this film, though. Catherine Keener, young Kristen Stewart, Jena Malone, but I think the most significant character and actor that contributes to this film, aside from Emile Hirsch, is Hal Holbrook. He plays Ron Franz, who is a elderly gentleman that befriends Chris near the end of his journey before he sets off to Alaska. He's almost like a surrogate father or grandfather figure to Chris. Hal Holbrook was actually nominated for Best Supporting Actor. It's one of only 2 Oscar nominations that this film received, surprisingly, because it is a phenomenal film. I can understand not winning, but to not even be nominated, to be overlooked in so many aspects and categories, I just felt it was very insulting to the art form. Not even this specific film, but just the art form in general. It is a beautiful film, shot exceptionally well. The cinematographer on this film is Eric Gauthier. He's a French cinematographer, and so he just kind of brings a different approach to the photography. In a lot of ways, it does have a foreign film element to it. It's not your typical Hollywood-looking film. There's a lot of beautiful shots of just nature in action, and Chris McCandless interacting with nature. It almost has a documentary feel in some regard because there are some handheld shots that are just really close and intimate and personal. But then there are these just beautiful sweeping shots of the landscape and the terrain and just the areas in which he moves through. So the cinematography was one thing that really stood out to me when I was watching it for the first time and for all time. It's one of like those things that's always in the foreground of my mind when I think of this film. I have a really strong connection with the visuals. The thing that impressed me the most about this film was Sean Penn's role in it. And he doesn't appear in a single frame of the entire movie. He doesn't have an acting role. I'm talking about his role as a writer, as a director, as a producer, as a filmmaker. It's a big film that travels across the entire country just as Christopher McCandless did. And to be able to manage all of that and maintain direction throughout all of that is a real credit to him as a filmmaker. The film and the story really is a tragedy of romanticism. Christopher McCandless, he's very well read. There's a lot of poetic allusions in this film, and it comes through in the character, and it comes through in the film and the filmmaking. Again, it's a very beautiful film that just speaks to the heart of the viewer. In that same breath, this film is not for cynics. It is not for people who have an I told you so attitude. It really is a film written for people and a film made for people who are looking for beauty in existence, who are looking for beauty in the world around them, and who are not motivated by power or money or materialism. That is essentially the heart of what Christopher McCandless was striving for, was an absence of all those things. It's also a story about rebellion in the most extreme sense. His parents were very successful people, but they were not the greatest people, and they were not the greatest people to him. And so when the point came in his life when he could set out on his own, he did just that, and he left everything behind and severed all ties with his family. And that idea in and of itself is something you encounter mostly just in stories and in fiction. A lot of people, when they run away from home, it's because of some horrific situation, and then they find themselves in a worse situation. Usually drugs or prostitution or murder or something along those lines. And Chris's story was a lot more driven by beauty and a sense and pursuit of freedom and freedom of choice, freedom of existence, and truth. I think above all else, he was searching for truth. Truth in and of himself and truth out in the world, because he certainly wasn't getting it at his home. I don't know that I have a favorite part of the film so much as the film as a whole and the elements involved in it. I really just think this film is kind of a standout, especially in contemporary cinema. So that's it for Into the Wild. Again, I highly recommend this film. The book is great too. If you're familiar with the story, it's worth checking out. If you're not familiar with the story, it's definitely worth checking out. And be sure to tune in to the Visually Hidden podcast, where we will be discussing this film at length. Until next time, see ya.